Looks like it's us. Here we are. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming. And I think everybody has been here before, except maybe a couple of you, to the Mayor's Roundtable.
Right.
So since we got such a small group, I'd love to go around and just let everybody introduce themselves. If you wouldn't mind. Asia, is it?
It is.
Would you like to start?
Are you changing your GT?
Good question. We can talk about that.
All right. Asia Williams, Blanchard, Idaho, running for District 2 Commissioner.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So we're just going around the room and introducing ourselves. So would you like to go next?
Sure. It's Karen Heffley, a longtime resident of Sandpoint.
Thanks.
I'm Kristen Steike from Monterey.
I'm Kendra Martin from, where am I from? Everywhere. But I'm currently in Naples, soon to be moving to Salem.
All right.
Dodie Glass, live in Dover.
I'm sorry, what is it?
Dodie Glass.
Dodie. Thank you.
Kristen Dodd, Sandpoint.
Thank you, Kristen.
I'm Stuart Howe. I'm a Sandpoint resident.
All right. And you've been here before to the round table or no?
I've been around, not this particular venue, no.
Okay. All right. Just wondering. Thanks.
Orland Glass, Dover.
All right. All right. Well, I hope everybody's comfortable. If you want to come in closer, happy to have you. I'm not contagious as far as I know. So
We just don't want you to bite.
yeah. So for those of you who haven't been, first of all, it's been, gosh, I think going on 4 months since we've had one of these. It seems like just yesterday to me, but time flies. But I try to do these once a month, and it's really, I'll always put an article in the paper, which, how many, did anyone read the article in the paper? I presume all of you did, otherwise you wouldn't be here, I imagine. Anyone did? No? Okay. Did anyone read the article in the paper?
I read one in January.
There was one.
Okay, so you didn't read the one in yesterday's paper?
Yeah.
Okay, how did you all find out about this?
Somebody texted and said she'll.
Okay, somebody was paying attention and let everybody else know. No, okay, fair enough. Well, thanks for coming. So just so you know how this works, I'll put an article in the paper the Thursday before. And then, it sort of seeds us a conversation, things to talk about. And so I'll usually kind of focus on, I do, yeah, and we can talk about it. Actually, this is today's paper, so it's, but it's in the reader and it's also in the B from yesterday, both from yesterday. And so, that gives us something to sort of chew on, but I'm also happy to, I'd like to kind of start there so we can, because usually people want to talk about those issues, but I'm happy to discuss whatever issues you want to bring up, Juneteenth or, whatever. So this is an open forum. It's a dialogue. I'm not here to monologue and tell you everything that I think. I want to hear what you think. And I'm happy to, have a dialogue, have a conversation here. We do have potentially some people joining us on Zoom. I try to make it as accessible as possible. So I was doing Facebook Live also, but that ended up being problematic. So we cut that out. We're doing Zoom. So if you ever, want to come to one of these, but you can't physically be here, feel free to, join us on Zoom. And I do my best to try to, let you, to respond to your questions and stuff on there if you want to text questions or whatever, just so you understand, kind of the lay of the land and how this works. And any questions about any of that? Okay. Lately I've been, focusing kind of more on a lot of the, oh, by the way, if anyone's looking for the restroom, they're right out here through the second door, not the entrance you came in, but the other door there, and there's a couple of restrooms in there. So, obviously it's the legislative session is open. There's a lot going on in the legislature right now. There's a lot going on here locally. There's just a lot going on right now, a lot to kind of keep up with. So I try to do my best to, kind of flag the things that I think are really relevant to us here locally, and also the things that I think are just worthy of paying attention to. So on that note, actually, I believe it was the last meeting that we had, or one of the last meetings that we had, and you were one of the people that brought up
Over at the, was that over at the?
this community hall.
The community hall?
Yeah. And you brought up the idea of ARPA funds. I think that was you, right? Or you were one of the people that was
Probably.
concerned about it. And then an article was in the paper, it was maybe 5 weeks ago. It was in the Bee. So that issue came up before the Bonner County Commissioners. And they had decided to table, and they've still, I believe they're still tabling ARPA funds coming through for the very concern that you brought up, that those funds would be potentially would require entities like Bonner County to mandate vaccines for either for those entities or for contractors that they hired to do it. So
One of a few concerns, yes.
one of a few concerns. Okay, well, that's the primary concern that I heard discussed in that article and at that meeting. But if there,
You mean as far as the legal opinion goes, or which article are you referring to?
yeah, yes, at the Bonner County Commissioner meeting,
The workshop?
the workshop, yeah, they chose to table that item.
Oh, before that. Okay.
Can
Okay,
I
so-
clarify, because this is
Yeah.
not exactly the timeline. So what happened was I wrote the resolutions and the money went back into the ARPA mitigation until they get an opinion from legal. So Bill Wilson gave an opinion, not a recommendation. At the workshop, I very clearly stated that the opinion given did not address the concerns that I had brought forth to the commissioners to review with respect to the rights of citizens of the country and residents of Bonner County as a whole. That ended not with a decision about anything, but with commissioners and the attorney saying, we'll agree to disagree even if they didn't talk about the issue. And so after that workshop, we held our own workshop on the 18th of March. And that was also, every ARPA thing we've done has actually. been in
18th
the
of
paper.
February.
18th of February.
Okay.
So there's a lot of ARPA articles in the from different people holding them. And so ours also made the paper on the
Okay.
18th, where we went through what the issues and concerns were briefly and then talked about ARPA.
So I was at that meeting. I was also at the workshop recently.
Okay. Okay, and I was just referring to the article that was covering the Bonner County Commissioner meeting from 5 weeks ago.
Yeah. We've been actually addressing the ARPA issue for quite a few months since last October.
Okay,
Yeah.
And
well, that's when you brought it to my attention at the meeting, this meeting at the city,
Right,
community hall.
right.
Okay, so I hear you saying that that it's not just the issue of vax mandates and by the way, so that there was clarity that came through on that, and Representative Sage Dixon got an opinion from the AG requiring that the language be unambiguous about whether there would be any strings attached to that ARPA funding. And as it stands, anything over $10 million apparently could be subject to conditions. Any funding under $10 million would not be.
That's
So-
not accurate.
That's not
That's not
accurate.
That's
accurate,
not
yeah.
accurate. And when are you saying you got an opinion from Sage Dixon? Because Sage Dixon agreed at his town hall that he didn't read ARPA, he didn't understand ARPA, and he was going to participate via Zoom with the workshop that we put on.
No, he said that the AG
He
lost
said
and got it
Sage Dixon got it from the AG.
from the AG, yeah.
And he's since received a link to the presentation that we did on last Friday.
Has he given any feedback on that?
No, I haven't heard back from him yet.
Yeah, but he,
I didn't get him the link till Monday
yeah.
because I had to get the video done.
So so it's not accurate to say the concern was whether or not there's going to be vaccine mandates. And that was a lot of the focus of Mr. Wilson's report was what can the government do? And do we have a point from which to litigate from? The way in which the question is being answered is not addressing the language of ARPA. And so it's also not accurate that over 10 million, you can just spend it. It's that the 10 million doesn't tell you how to spend, but you're still subjected to the rules of ARPA. And so one of the concerns I brought is in the language of ARPA, it says that you have to respond to scale to include vaccine, increasing in vaccines. That's the language of ARPA. So the word mandate is not there. So one of my questions to Bill Wilson and the commissioners was, how can you accept ARPA money if we are a constitutional county, if we have declined and we are not actively responding to scale? And at the time of our workshop on the 18th, Panhandle Health had us listed as a severe outbreak for COVID. And so since we do not respond to scale, which is within just the generic language of the document, but it's very clear of what that means, how can you spend ARPA money without a risk of having to return it? That has not been answered. And that is, I talked to Sage Dixon at his town hall, and he didn't understand that that language was in the document. So he said he specifically said, I can't support spending it because no one has addressed that at that time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Stuart Howell, for the record, Sandpoint resident. The challenge that I see here is that it's been clearly mischaracterized, this entire scenario, that Sandpoint residents are afraid of being held accountable to machinations by the federal government. We see clearly that the way that it's written, it's very vague, so that any conditions that come up down the road would require us to fall under the mantle of whatever they decide. Once we've taken the money, it appears to be accurate that it's been characterized as a Trojan horse, by which if we don't just return the money, we are basically under the boot heels of whatever the federal government decides further down the road would be required of us to fulfill the obligations. It's just not, it's not anywhere near an honest discussion about this. And the money does not look like it can be anything but returned without almost certain dire consequences of some sort once the can's been kicked down the road a little bit and it bears fruit. It's just not debatable if somebody were to look at it honestly and objectively. And as a resident, I just strongly caution anybody who's looking to actually have a honest dialogue about this to just not table it, not do anything but return that money, not accept that money, because the downside is a virtual certainty and it's written so vaguely that they can roll out whatever they want to subject us to. And the track record of these entities is clearly not something that we want to just have on blind faith that we can just follow this course.
Well, and also, if we were to be audited, and so like one part of the opinion is okay, well, we don't have the authority as a county to mandate some of the things that you guys are concerned about being mandated, and they just passed this, the OSHA got shot down through Supreme Court, so we don't have anything to worry about, except that didn't include healthcare workers, by the way. But all that aside, if we don't comply and they do come later and say, okay, these are the things that we need you to do. We need you to mandate vaccines or mandate masks or whatever it is, and we don't comply with that, and they say, okay, now you need to send that money back. If we've already spent that money, do we have the money? I mean, can we pay it back without having to tax the citizens again and over and above to pay that money back because we've already spent it? And that's a question I presented to the commissioners, and the answer was, oh, well, we could get the money over the course of a few years. Yeah, by taxing the residents. But so I present the same question to you here for Sandpoint. If we accept that money, we spend it, we later get audited, it's found that we're not complying with some of the things that they want us to comply with, how are we going to pay that money back? That could bankrupt our city.
I think that it's not just the auditing and compliance, it's not you can't say it's a conspiracy because you're washing it out, pulled out in other states, but the position of Bonner County actually specifically contravenes with ARPA. And that specifically says you cannot contravene with anything related to that. We decided by saying we're constitutional and we will not mandate, you've actually taken a position in opposition. So how can you spend the money without risking? And my issue is no one's walking through the cost benefit risk analysis of taking money when you know that we're not in compliance, because our position is in opposition and it tells you you can't be.
Okay, so I'm gonna lift some of the fog as well. The sheriff gave money back because of a clause that contained executive orders. Recipients must comply with all federal regulations, with all applicable federal regulations, stipulations, and executive orders. Now, I found out that there are over 70 municipalities and counties in Texas alone who have rejected ARPA money because of that clause. So we dug deep. There's a team of us who've actually been studying the over 1,000 pages of compliance that you are highly suggested to read and comprehend before you spend ARPA. So a lot of people want to spend ARPA money, and the Bonner County commissioners started to spend ARPA money until a group of us came up and said, do you realize what you're doing? You haven't read all of the compliance documents yet. And in doing the research, there's been almost 11 executive orders have been found that Biden signed when he came into office. And those executive orders have almost immediate ties to ARPA sections of the ARPA bill, as well as same verbiage, same task force, same workforce language, same genomic sequencing language, same contact tracing language as is found in the sections within the ARPA bill, and flow over into the compliance regulations themselves. Because the whole ARPA bill is designed to take on supposedly COVID and manage it. And then, oh, by the way, we're going to give you money for infrastructure and sewer and water or broadband. And you scratch your head and you go, what does that have to do with COVID? It's, if you remember back in the Obama era, oh, let's just sign it and then we'll figure out what's in it. That's kind of the same thing that they've done with ARPA. There is so many Coeur d'Alene. I spoke at the city council in Coeur d'Alene, and I was flabbergasted, surprising, I mean, happy about it. The citizenry were so much more educated than the elected officials. And they stepped forward. I came down because I've been studying ARPA since the sheriff returned it. And we came forward with all of the evidences, all of the things that any elected official who answers to the authority that put them there, which is the people, should be listening to. We are alarmed because of the things that we're reading, the connections we're seeing together. And each day that goes by, this jigsaw puzzle that dumped out in front of us that you could lay on your table is coming more and more and more and more and more into view, that this is a massive push for federal control that nobody is looking at. No elected official, only one, down in Coeur d'Alene. After I had 6 meetings that I spoke at that ARPA, only one person rejected receiving ARPA. Only one elected official in 6 separate meetings. That's bizarre. When highly educated people are coming forward with so much evidence that this is dangerous. The biggest danger is this is a taxation. When you take ARPA funds, you are complicit in inflation, because this isn't money we had laying around. We had a revenue of $5.9 trillion. We had a deficit or expenditure of 6.9. So that difference that had to be found wasn't found within the budget. It was printed. That flowed out through ARPA and has flown out through ARPA into the citizenry. So that is actually an unvoted upon taxation because of inflation. The $20 you had in your pocket before ARPA money was printed now is only worth 10. So you have been stolen from. We've been stolen from. It's a taxation without representation, sort of thing. But what we've been asking for months is for our elected officials to take off the glazed eyes about all the free money. We all learned as kids, there's nothing free. There's nothing. There's a cost. One way or another, you're going to have to pay it. And it's a lot of money. It's a very big tantalizing carrot. And the hardship is the elected officials don't want to stop. Listen to what the citizens are bringing. Why wouldn't the citizens want the money? Nobody's asked that question. Why wouldn't they want this free money? Because we don't want to have to pay the cost for inflation. We don't want to have to pay the taxation without representation. I mean, sure, if I threw,
We don't want to be complicit in theft
theft, and that's what
and
it is.
inflation and yeah, I mean, it's just, it's wrong.
It's
just
morally wrong.
I think those are two different issues. Is I'm standing firmly on the language in the document is enough without having an issue where somebody can say its opinion. It's specifically written in a way that the language is questionable. It is a giveaway of civil liberties, and my response to the commissioners was taking ARPA money has you exchanging civil liberties of people that you don't have the right to exchange, because it requires that I have to give up some of my liberty in order to become compliant with it in the language. And so my presentation of the language is very specific to what does ARPA say. Not messing with the, is there some moral interpretation there, but just the language of ARPA has an exchange of my personal liberties for money. And that has not been reviewed because we already, with sheriff returning the money, it goes again against contravening because we're saying we're not going to enforce something. So I'm resting on just the document. The language doesn't serve our community, and the positions that the community has taken as a whole are not in compliance. So we can't spend the money regardless of where you'll always find. I think, to be honest, I think the county is a 50-50. Of course they'd like to spend the money. There are people that want to spend it. There are people that don't want to spend it for all the reasons that Kendra listed. But legally, there's a problem with the document. And one of the things that you have agreed with, and I talked to Bill Wilson, is you signed today to say that you agree to follow rules that will come out tomorrow.
April.
So
after
you
April 30th.
cannot, you can't say that you truly vetted my risk when that's what you signed. And so it is not vague. And so I challenge the legal opinion that says ARPA is vague. It's not vague. It's actually very specific in that they want a significant amount of control, and they're giving you very clear information that says, take the money, I want the control. It's not vague, actually, it's very clear. And they tell you they're going to ask for more information later, which includes a lot of demographic data turning over to the federal government, which is inherently not a Bonner County resident mindset. And so as we go through and create resolutions, we created a resolution in the county in October of 2021 of what we won't do. But what we haven't required is that every last one of those commissioners read the document to understand the language and not just say, oh, you guys are just concerned about a vaccine mandate or mask mandate. That's not my concern. It is very clear what the expectation is. And so to say there's no option for that doesn't answer any of the legal questions of the document. My one request to the commissioners were, fine, you want to spend the money, what are our lawyers doing to the federal government to say that this is not a legal way of drafting an agreement with the county and change the language? But nobody's doing that because they just want the money. And so if you're not going to actively work on the vagueness of the issues that are concerning our civil liberties, you can't take the money because we've said as a community, we're going to violate it because we are violating it. And we made resolutions and voted on it. It's not a passive decision. We actually held a whole group of people and made a decision. So for conservative states, it is not unreasonable to be looked at directly the same way that Arizona is. And Arizona's issue isn't, they said to their community, if your kid goes to a school with a mask mandate, you can pull your money out and go to a school that doesn't have it. And that's what they're being held accountable for. And so the answer is, don't encourage people not to be masked. Otherwise, you have to give the money back. And they had 60 days to return the money. What bank is going to say to Bonner County or Sandpoint, you guys don't want to follow the rules, I'll help you. The banking industry is very, very, very liberal right now.
Are you familiar with the Arizona case?
And so it's not
They're
reasonable.
their $163 million is being clawed back by the Treasury. So what happened is they took it, the Treasury found a non-compliance issue, demanded that they redo their program, which then the governor is suing the United States Treasury to recoup or to keep the $163 million that the Treasury is now saying you're going to have to pay back. I want to read you directly from the document, so it's not us speaking. This is the document speaking. On page 10 of the guidance and compliance, it says, if non-compliant with requirements, regs, guidance, or any reporting or other program requirements, and let me just give you a caveat. This program, you have up till 2024 to allocate the money to a project or spend the money, and then they have till 2026 to audit you. So the auditing thing can wait all the way till the end to actually come and audit how you spent the money. But it says, Treasury may impose additional conditions of future awards or take other remedies in case of violation regarding use of funds. Previous payments shall be subject to recoupment. Then on page 14, it says any funds paid to recipients that are determined by the Treasury Office of Inspector General to have been misused or that are determined by Treasury to be subject to repayment obligations shall constitute a debt to the federal government. And everybody that signed for ARPA signed this award terms and conditions that refer to this guidance and reporting. Then also on page 14, it says any debt determined to be owed the federal government must be paid promptly by recipient. A debt is delinquent if it is not paid by the date specified in the Treasury's initial written demand for payment. So Arizona is about 30 days into that 60 days. And then it says Treasury will take any action available to it to create such a debt. There's no, and we've all heard about the IRS freezing bank accounts or, going into your bank account and recouping a debt they thought, and then people have to take it to court to get the money back. So it's not like we're dealing with an entity that we don't have history of, they take what they want until, and then you have to go find out how to get it back. Then when I was referring to after April is when they come out with new rules that we don't even know. That's listed under the project demographic distribution. It's a phased in thing. So you have until April 30th to report how you're going to spend, how you've spent ARPA money or how you're going to spend it. We're hoping you'll actually listen and hear us and reconsider and send it back. But it says that you have to report April 30th. Once you report, it says after that, we're going to start collecting data from all of this reporting, and then we're going to hand out more regulations. So what happens if all of the spending that you did beforehand doesn't match the regulations that come out after they harvested all the data in April? So they're leaving this gaping hole of a possible non-compliance. That is noteworthy and something
Not
to be
only
concerned about.
possible, but very highly likely,
Yes.
if not certain. Yeah.
Can you read that first section again that talks about the regulations that are forthcoming? The first part
Top
that
of
you read.
page 10. The page 10. If non-compliant with requirements, regulations, guidance, or any reporting of other program requirements, Treasury may impose additional conditions of future awards or take other remedies.
I think I understand what you're asking her. What she read isn't the part about future awards. What that section is about is that the Treasury then can say, and Bill Wilson mentioned this, to say, you're defaulting in ARPA, we're going to withhold other types of money.
Like your second trench.
The section that talks about you're going to receive the awards in the future is what he's talking about.
That's under the project
That's not
demographic
intended. That is under project.
distribution. It is also in the guidance and reporting document,
Well, I
which
can
is
tell
a,
you,
Well,
think it's a
I mean,
66.
I hear what you're saying. Let me just
Yeah.
kind of tell you what I'm hearing and then you can tell me if I'm getting it, okay? Basically, the concern that I hear you saying is that if entities take the ARPA funding, that there's no there's forthcoming regulations that we have no idea what they are.
After April.
After April. But
But-
once that money's already spent, then those regulations could come through and say, oh, by the way, you can't spend it on that. Or if you did spend it on that, then there's going to be these additional conditions. And if you didn't meet these conditions, then you're going to have to give the money back.
Yeah.
And if and you're going to have to give the money back promptly.
Or sue them to keep it like Governor Ducey is doing right now. And as Bill Wilson's legal opinion recommended, cases where the federal government's not allowed to do this, they're not allowed to do that. Congress isn't allowed to do this, but you're talking about the cost of litigating against the United States Treasury. That's a big question mark. Do we really want to get ourselves into that? Do we need to?
It's on page 8.
If we don't need, I mean, because this was supposed to be how COVID affected the economy. If, and the 10 million, one of the strings that's attached to the 10 million is a revenue and tax loss. From what we see with the Bonner County, there hasn't been a loss. So that using that clause to use some of the money is very questionable to me, because I've done all of their counties since 2017. I don't see a loss. I haven't done the city, but you really have to be very, very careful. You have to show the loss to be able to use that money, or at least in a history. If there's an audit, you have to show a history that spells out a loss. So it's the rules and regulations that will come after they collect the data from all the reporting on April 30th. That's a concern. But there is enough already in the over 1,000 pages of documentation that you have to go look at HUD, you got to go look at the Social Security Act. You have to look at executive orders. There's so many pieces of document all tied in that you have to have, and you're exhorted by the US Treasury to have an understanding of all these documents. So if you don't have a division that's dedicated to doing all this research and really figuring out why are we even, county, city, whatever, why are we anxious to spend money that we really don't need? You're also breaking the relationship between you and your citizenry. The citizens of your city or your county should be able to know that any problem that you have and be able to come together with you and go, how are we going to figure this out so we don't have to stick our foot in a snare trap?
I'd like to address the need factor. Both the county and the city, as I understand it, had surplus, is in financial surplus. The city of Sandpoint had 2 summers of incredible business. Merchants downtown have told me that they've had the best summers ever. I owned a business in Sandpoint from 1975 to 2004, and I have a relationship with businesses in town. They did amazingly well. There is money. Why would we take things we don't need? Somewhere we've got to stop thinking we're entitled to this stuff. Why do we need to be entitled to anything that we can support ourselves?
We should support ourselves. I
So
think we don't need their help.
Yeah, so it's not fiscally sound. So if, as an individual, ask yourself, would you run your own household like this? Would you run your own pocketbook like this, especially if you had surplus and enter into some nebulous quasi agreement? And the answer likely for anyone of sound mind, the answer is no. So then to extrapolate that out to a number of citizens, not just yourself, just makes no logical sense. So, I did read the article, thank you. And this is an honest question. Did you write this yourself, or do you have help in the city hall?
Yeah.
You wrote it yourself, okay. So the narrative is a match to the same narrative that Dan McDonald is actually posting on his social media. And also what I'm hearing from Luke Onmont, if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. And it's talking about this alarming trend of misinformation, and it's almost being done on purpose to be divisive. And ironically, the people who are saying these things have actually not read the massive amount of ARPA information that it is, which is still continually morphing per the document itself. So it's literally the opposite that's happening.
I think it's important
So
to
because
point
this,
out
the information is actually here from the people who have read and analyzed it. And so I just want to pass that on, but your narrative is a match to surprisingly so to some other people in the community. And that's very coincidental. I urge you to be a thought leader. Think independently, research independently. The citizens are here to support you, Shelby, because I think we trust that you do the same for us. But if I'm hearing the same narrative that other people are saying just a couple days ago, it indicates to me it's just too coincidental. So I just urge you to branch out from that.
I'd like to add on to that. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. I think it's important to note that there are agendas and even perhaps specific entities involved that will profit from the status quo moving forward with the federal government doing what the federal government does, is create fear and power and control. And that we need to acknowledge the fact that there are agendas and personal positions afoot that are adverse to really dealing with this directly and honestly on behalf of the citizenry. And it doesn't go without being noted, and I certainly wouldn't point out any more than this needs to be looked at, because the status quo and these coincidences of talking points and narratives and agendas are beyond coincidence. It's not, I mean, everything makes sense if you look at it from a high enough perspective or step back and look at why things have occurred the way that they do. I think this needs to be addressed honestly, and we need to really look at these things very pragmatically from a big enough picture so that this all does make perfect sense. That's my 2 cents on that. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Have you read the ARPA documents?
No.
I think if nobody reads it and everybody wants to say you want an opinion, I think it's a highly emotional topic where people add subjective into objective, and it's not needed to talk about ARPA subjectively because the document is very capable of addressing the concerns. At the end of the day,
It speaks for itself.
yeah, I don't need to say where I stand on inflation, because whether we like it or not taking the money is not going to change the fact that the money was printed and inflation is existing. That's not going to change. Me being able to say I stand out of moral high ground because I said no doesn't change anything about ARPA. At the end of the day, what you got from Bill Wilson was an opinion that said we have a foundation from which to sue the federal government if they ask for the money back. And my end question of that is, can we afford to sue the federal government? And how long does that take and how quickly does that get resolved? So if you don't read it and you just want that opinion, can Sandpoint as a city afford to be in litigation with the federal government? Or would you as mayor have to say, we cannot afford this. You cannot collect taxes fast enough for how quickly litigation ensues. We have to just institute what they told us to do to not have to pay it back. That's my question. If that's all you want to do, if nobody wants to read the document.
Yeah, well, actually, I
If you
appreciate
want to,
that
yeah.
point, and you bring up a really good point, is that, and that's been the question that's been kicking around in my mind, is this whole idea of, conditions that come down the road that entities are going to be obligated to. That there's no precedence for that I'm aware. That's not how business is done. That's not how contracts work. Those things don't hold up in court. And so, yeah,
Contracts
you're
are
right.
usually written much better than this.
But this
Well,
contract,
but to your point, it's not at that point, it's not the city of Sandpoint and the Bonner County Commissioners and the state of Arizona. It's a class action lawsuit of who knows how many thousands of entities across the United States that are suing the U.S. Treasury or the federal government, pick your agency. But and so, I mean, we're standing on fantastic ground there from a legal perspective, right? Because
But yeah, why would we even want to go there?
Practically, do you know how many lawsuits are won against the federal government?
let's just
Like
go
zero.
objectively of what he said though. objectively, you're saying that the risk, and then I would ask you to support the idea that the majority of the country said that that information we're not going to follow through with. And therefore, everyone would enter into a class action because you're using class action as a hedge to subvert some of the costs that litigation would cost you. But there's actually not that many people that have actually read and actually care about what's in the document. It's actually, there are enough that should raise to the concern that you should listen to, but not enough to say, we're going to jump in the litigation pool with you, because the moment the federal government tells you you have 60 days to give the money back, you're saying you think you could garner enough support across the country of counties and city to enter into a class action lawsuit? No, because you have to take an action within 60 days. So you don't have the protection unless you're saying as an elected official, you're going to garner support before you spend the money to say, when they come after us, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have a plan in place. And that's what I mean by, where are you assessing the risks associated with the decision? If you're not going to have a pre-planned response to if they come to take the money from the great footing that all of the case law Bill Wilson said we have, if we're not actively doing that, you've got your attorney on deck to say, when I call you in the middle of the night, everybody's filing. You don't have 60 days to wait because you have defaulted already.
Well, you
Because look at
just need to file
Arizona.
before that
Arizona's in the
60
same
day
spot.
period.
So where is their class action lawsuit? They're a standalone. You've watched Florida be a standalone on conservative issues against the federal government. So if you would say that's the route you would take, who are the people that are going to join a class action if you get tagged and they don't get tagged? Because just because you get tagged doesn't mean the next state's going to get tagged.
Keep in
I've
mind, the US
audited,
Treasury
I've
has
audited
access
with
to
the
your
state of
accounts.
Washington, and I can tell you, there are times when people tell me, I've never been tagged for that issue, even though it's a reasonable issue to tag somebody for. So again, where's the risk analysis that says I have a solid foundation to stand on to risk litigation with the federal government who can print their money? You have to get taxpayers and you can only go so high. What's the risk? And I think you should explain that then, if that's your understanding of it. What's your plan of action when you spent it yesterday, today you get your note from the Treasury saying you're out of compliance, you have 60 days to give it back. What are you doing? What's your plan of action as the mayor? And I think that's a reasonable response if that's something that you thought of.
Hmm.
So who are we calling to help with a class action lawsuit?
Well, I mean, you file your claim, and I mean, it sounds like if what you're saying is true, then, you know, there must be many other cases around the country. Arizona, Florida are the tip of the iceberg.
You have 60 days to find
Yeah.
them all. Because if they've been able to hide under the radar, why would they come out and say?
Well, you can, as long as you file before the deadline, you know, that it puts it on a pause, and then it goes through the legal process, right?
No, the
And
US
once
Treasury
it's
has
in that-
access to your account right now. You signed that away when your treasurer, whoever assigned for the money, they signed a document called the award terms and conditions. And in that document, it gives permission to the US Treasury to have access to all of your records, all of your accounts. Cheryl Peel, the Treasury for Bonner County, she was having a hard time accepting the fact that the Treasury would have access to all their bank accounts. She actually had to, and we got this through public records, that she actually had to work with somebody from the federal government to work a different wording so that she could feel comfortable with the US Treasury having access to their bank accounts.
Hmm.
And you'd have to talk to her about how that went
I
down.
understand what
So
you're
it's a
saying.
dangerous gamble that you're
It's
gambling
just,
with.
you can't say but it would work. You have to give the cost benefit analysis that includes the risk and the reward, and be able to give a constituent we've weighed the issue.
Yeah.
This is the risk, and it's worth taking it because of A, B, and C. And we don't have to agree in the end, but the plan should be laid out so that we can make an objective assessment of the decision, but also of the people making the decisions, because everybody's hiding behind other people instead of standing on a solid ground, because nobody feels obligated to read the document. That's not acceptable to me. I don't understand how people can make a decision to spend money when enough people have read it that have a question. Let's say we're all 100% wrong. If we're talking about you accepting the money, why are you not obligated to read it? So that at least at night you can say, I've read it, I've heard the concerns, I've completed my consequentialism review of it, and I'm okay spending it.
In
But
addition,
that's never what we get.
Yeah,
in addition to that,
that's step one.
I mean, just,
Step one hasn't happened.
I just start reading this, your article, and right off the bat, you're talking about misinformation and talking about how okay, so this part, you said the resolution was proposed because of misinformation that accepting the funds would require the county to implement a federal vaccine mandate. This claim is false and is being used to turn community members against each other. But you just said you haven't read the document. So how do you know that's misinformation? How do you know that that's false?
Well, I'm gonna pause since I'm the writer. Where did you get that from? Because you
Yeah.
never asked me why I wrote the resolution. And I can tell you very transparently, I emailed all three commissioners multiple times and sat every Tuesday over, explained to me A, B, and C, and they never explained it. And then what you had was the information from a county clerk that stood up, and he said, we're continuing to spend ARPA money, while you had three commissioners saying that we were not. And he said there is a risk associated with spending ARPA money, while the commissioners would verbally say, if those things are required, we'll send it back. So they were talking out of both sides of their mouth. Once the county clerk stood up and said, if you continue to spend it, and they were, because we were allowing EMS to draw on $800,300. So once that happened, I contacted legislatures and I wrote the resolutions. It was required that a commissioner present it in order to get it on the agenda. So before you wrote that, since I'm the author, why didn't you ask me why I wrote it? Because I didn't say anything about a vaccine mandate. I said we got clear concern from elected officials in the county about continuing to spend it while they were agreeing that it was questionable. That's why it was written.
Okay.
And I didn't get a call. And I have been hearing the conspiracy theory person issue. I've
Yeah,
written
we've
actually
never
a
seen
few
people on the other
op-eds.
side come
I've
forward.
I've
Yeah, I'm
actually
sorry, what
written
did
a
you say?
few.
Well, excuse me, Adrian, I just need to make this point. There has never been a group of people that have come to the commissioners meetings, this meeting, or the Quarter Lane city council meetings, or elected official meetings. I have never seen a group of people come forward and say, we want the ARPA money. We need the ARPA money. There has, I think you could ask everybody here, has anybody actually heard verbally?
I don't
want
care
the
whether
ARPA
anybody
money"?
wants it. I want elected people to read the damn document and make an objective, reasonable decision with
Which is
facts,
fair,
which
is
I
fair.
have read. And if you are voting on whether or not I'm subjected to what I see, it is reasonable, it is rational to say, stop spending the money. When the sheriff returned the money, that should have sparked a request for them to read it. So I didn't do it out of a vaccine mandate, and nowhere in my resolution did it say anything about a vaccine mandate. I never wrote anything about a concern about a vaccine mandate. That's actually the least of the concerns of all of the crap that's in that document.
Right.
Okay.
And so I'm tired of people in elected positions who won't do the work, but are putting an effort out there to do a trash, and that is trash because I'm the author of that. And you didn't ask me. And I want to also ask, did you read my resolutions?
I didn't read your resolution.
So how do you know that it's coming from a conspiracy theory? I read,
I'm
you said
basing
you wrote
on,
that.
yeah, I'm basing that off of what I read in the paper, in our local paper, and what I've heard from people who
I
are,
Yeah,
Espousing this.
that's.
So that's not
okay,
factual.
hang on one second.
Yeah.
So we are on to something here, and I think what we're agreeing on is you were in an echo chamber. That's what the definition of an echo chamber is, and that gets back to my comment. I could tell by reading it, you were essentially in an echo chamber. And if you're going to be making sound decisions that people look to and say, this mayor is informed, this mayor may have a future, you know, whatever your aspirations are, right, for your next step, right? You cannot stay in the echo chamber because people are going to notice that. It becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly. Okay, so that's, I think we're on the same page now.
I don't think America's willing to do that anymore. I think Americans, after the last couple of years that we had, this is what you're seeing. How many people were in the Quarter Lane City Council meeting? There was like over 100 and 125 people that showed up at that city council meeting. It was a full packed house. It was a full packed house last Friday when we made a presentation to the public because we couldn't get the commissioners to allow us to have a workshop. It was packed out.
Can we
People are
have an
showing up.
agreement that you'll read the ARPA document? And then I'll email you the resolutions. Because it's not, that's the same thing with having a workshop with the commissioners when Commissioner Connolly says, well, I've read about 100 pages. You can't hold a workshop if your desire is to actually understand what's going on in the community. It's just, I have to mark it off and say that I did it.
Well, and can I just, too, real quick, a minute ago, you had said something about, well, we don't have precedent that you're aware of to support these concerns. I've seen precedent, ungodly precedents being set in the last couple of years, the last decade. There's all the time, there's new precedents being set that we thought would never happen. I never thought I would see an ESG score coming to America. That was something that we saw in China. And
ESG score?
yes,
That's in the market.
so
It's a social
That's-
credit.
it's a social credit
score
system.
system through the bank, through banking and businesses, all businesses and banks.
So it's another form of control from the government saying, if you don't comply with what we want you to comply with, then you might not be able to buy a house. You might not be able to obtain a loan. There's, I don't know, 6 or 7 major banks in the United States that are already starting to adopt these principles.
Just Google ESG Chase, Google ESG B of A,
Okay.
and it makes it seem very pleasant because it's economic, social, and government, and how well you comply with the different entities in that realm that go according to the narrative.
Okay.
You get scored.
So that's just one example of something that we never thought in a million years we would ever see something like that here in the United States, the land of the free. We never thought we would see, vaccine mandates being even talked about, more or less actually happening.
Well, we've had vaccine mandates historically here. And in fact, we currently have vaccine mandates in
No, we
schools. And
Well,
yeah, schools require that you have.
But you
all
can get
your-
exemption.
Sure, well,
There's
you get
always been
There's always been
And they've been
exemptions.
banning.
It's not, so that's not an accurate representation. The schools don't have a mandate. They ask you for your MMR card. And then if you don't have one and you won't get vaccinated, you're just on the list for if there's a breakout. That's not the definition of a mandate.
Well, but that's the,
I was
The
not
mandates
denied
that-
entry into the University of Washington for not being vaccinated. You just have to say that you're not.
The point
Right,
is
but I'm
that
saying
there
that-
are new
that-
precedents.
that there would, COVID would be treated no differently if there was a COVID.
It is being treated differently though. As a healthcare provider, I can't work in the state of Washington for not being vaccinated. I've been working in the state of Washington without being vaccinated for all the other things I'm not vaccinated for. But with COVID, you had until the 2nd of October to discontinue working in the state of Washington if you were not going to be vaccinated. So that's not an accurate representation of vaccinations in the United States.
And it still should be choice.
And point needs to be addressed. It is not by definition even a vaccine. It's experimental gene therapy. It has nothing to do by definition until they change the definition of actually addressing a health issue. It's fraud, like top to bottom, side to side.
Okay. I think we might be going down a rabbit hole there. We've got 5 minutes left and I'm happy to keep talking about this or whatever you want to talk about, but I just want to, let you know.
Can you
Yeah.
read the document and then reschedule this?
Well, we're going to do this again next month. I can't tell you that this will be the issue, but we can certainly talk about it next month.
If I send you the CliffsNotes version of ARPA. where
I would
pull a
appreciate that,
quote
Asia.
out of it,
Merlin, what
I would
did you?
appreciate
And
that.
then to give you my resolutions that I wrote.
I would appreciate that.
And then will you write a retraction from your conspiracy theory once you receive my resolutions? Because that is a mischaracterization. And if you chose to take that because the commissioner told you without reading it, that's not reasonable.
Okay.
It's in here.
I will read what you send me and I will make my own decision from there.
Okay, thank
I
you.
can't promise that I will
Just
send you a
for
retraction.
clarity's sake,
Yeah.
so you held this roundtable without having actually read the ARPA document?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, this roundtable, that wasn't the purpose of this meeting per se, but I did want to address the EMS issue that came up a month ago before the Bonner County Commissioners, and we're going in deep here with our. Yeah, go
Brandon,
ahead.
because you asked about the other issues that they,
I didn't mean to cut you off, so he didn't get a chance to speak. Can we go back to him first? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's not surprising that people get confused on this, okay? You have back here an explanation of what and an explanation of how. It goes back to what principles you as a elected official operate under. And the whole COVID, this whole ARPA thing has been treated like manna from heaven, right? Free money. And as pointed out, it's not free, okay? The reason they said that it's tax neutral is because they just printed the money. So it's more like, instead of manna from heaven, it's like fruit from the poison tree. And the episode that happened in Arizona, you have to think about what's going on behind the scenes with the state of Arizona, because Congresswoman Sinema was not going according to plan of the Build Back Better program and joining with Senator Manchin in West Virginia and not voting for that bill. So Arizona was a soft target. And so to go after Arizona on whatever, okay, it happened to be this case, was to apply pressure to Arizona. I mean, at least that's my superficial take on it. But it goes back to principle. And if you can't find a principle of why you take this money and realizing what you know about it, that it's made out of whole cloth, would give you pause and kind of lean on the side that, hey, we're not going to play this game. And it's great. I mean, hey, the whole world operates on money, right? It doesn't. It operates on principle. And that's what these ladies have studied really hard and tried to lay out.
Stuart, real quick, I wanted to talk about one of the other issues really quick.
Yeah, let me just, because
you had brought it up. I think it's important before we get too far away from it, for me to address your concern. You asked about other issues in here. One very important thing is the issue of militias. And it was mischaracterized that there's misinformation about the issue of having well-regulated militias, to stand in the breach and protect our community. And that's also being passed off in this article you wrote as a, bunch of hokum conspiracy theory. But in actuality, if you look at it, it is also being mischaracterized. And it's a very valid concern that the function of a well-regulated militia be kept in its original stated form so that we can protect ourselves against an out-of-control federal government or all the other things that are the reason that there is a well-regulated militia be necessary for a free state. So this is just more of this piled onto, for some reason, this is all inverted into a mistruth, which is actually the most truthful things that are coming out that just somehow fail to get recognized. I needed to say that. There's a theme here. Thank you.
there's a lot I could say to that. But sir, you came in late and you wanted to say something?
Well, I did want to follow up on, I believe that's Mr. Glass, on his comment about the economics of the situation. He was referring to, I think, the devaluation of the dollar in order to create the ARPA money war chest. And just to give you some backdrops on those statistics, for 2021, M2, are you familiar with M2? M2 is a Federal Reserve measure of the amount of money circulating in the economy. So it's a broad measure. It's a broad measure of the amount of money in the economy. In 2021, M2 was expanded by 11.5% roughly. Now, when you expand the supply of money in any economy and the number of goods in that economy stays relatively the same, then and you inflate the supply of the money, the new money that is created steals all of its value from the money that is currently in existence. That's devaluation, right? So just to put that ARPA in that context, ARPA accounted for 10% expansion in M2. So the one bill expanded the money supply in the United States by 10%, which is effectively stealing 10% of the value of the previously existing money. So to claim that it's tax neutral is technically correct, but actually and practically incorrect. And you might say, well, expansion of the money supply or devaluation is not a tax. And that would also be technically correct. It would be more similar to actual theft. And I think that's the point that Mr. Glass was trying to make about we need to consider the moral principles as well. And just to sum it, I wanted to firm up that point with some statistics.
And the ladies brought that up before you came in as well. So it's after 5. I have to go get my kids, but I would like to continue this conversation the next time we meet. And Asia, do you have my email?
I do not.
It's mayor@sandpointidaho.gov.
Sure.
And any of the rest of you, if you want to send me anything on this, I'd appreciate it.
We can certainly send you the presentation that we did Friday night to educate the citizens.
Would you be willing to, well, it's not that
It's like
long.
38 minutes.
Okay,
Would you be willing
Is
to
it-
watch that?
sure. Yeah, you can send that to me. Yeah, just via email. Is that, you gave that presentation to who?
We gave it at the VFW hall. We gave it to the
Okay.
citizens.
Okay.
Well, here's
Oh, you have it?
Here's a
in the
link.
Cloud somewhere?
It's a
Okay.
link that you can follow.
Okay. Hey, I want to thank everybody for coming today, and I appreciate just the dialogue here. This was a really respectful, informative dialogue. You taught me a lot, and I'm interested to learn more. And I just appreciate I can see your passion and your desire to want to do the right thing and serve your community. And
again, ask
do so
yourself,
respectfully. I
Why
appreciate
wouldn't
it.
we want the money? Why wouldn't the citizens want the money? And here we are, the only ones standing up saying, we don't want this kind of money.
No, it's because of our ARPA militia, our training, our militia training.
Thank you, Shelby.
Well,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah, you as well. Thanks.